asked me to speak on anxiety, and so I prepared an extensive message on anxiety, and I thought then I would just share that with our church people as well. So the table of contents, there are 10 things. First, I'm going to introduce myself and our Integrative Counseling Institute team and Santa Ecclesia. Then I'm going to suggest some recommended books, and then I'm going to lead you in exploring Dr. Baker, an incredible clinical psychologist down in Pasadena, who is my clinical supervisor from 1996 to 2003 when I was doing my PhD program, and his YouTube clips. And then I'm going to talk about a research Baker and his mentor did on religiosity and anxiety. And then I'm going to talk about anxiety and sin. And then I'm going to point us to Dr. Larry Crabb's work on anxiety, and then look at the neurobiology and neuropsychology of anxiety, and then integrate all this with our biblical scriptural understanding. Then I'm going to focus on attachment theory that describes how we are made for relationship, and then a very practical section of anxiety, some YouTube clips. So we will get through probably the first 5 today, and next Sunday we'll get through the other 5 contents. So first, something about ICI. Brenda and I we met in 1968. We married in 1975. So there's a picture of us, and back in 75, I was called the Brownsville United Presbyterian Church, and that's a picture, 2 of us on the left, and then most recent picture. Note the power position. Picture on the left, I have my arms around Bren, and now that's shifted. The recent picture, she's got me under control. Now, talk about anxiety. Anxiety is a very relational experience. So Integrative Institute of Integrated Counseling, my background, it took me about 10 years to digest neurobiology, neuropsychology, and then integrate that into what the Bible says about relationship. And ICI, which I founded, formerly it was called Northwest Institute for Integrative Counseling and Training, but that was too long, so we shortened it NWIICT to ICI. And so, and we work, we offer counseling, I do supervision, training, and coaching, and I supervise not only clinical counselors. These are people who have their master's degrees and who need 2,000 hours of direct client counseling hours before they can take their license. And then most recently, we've added a wonderful component of starting to train pastoral counselors. And that pastoral counseling leadership includes Jocelyn Castaneda, who is an excellent executive administrator. She helps me to run the ICI Institute, and then we have wonderful pastoral counselors that meet every Friday for supervision, and I'm training them to clinical standards and helping them integrate their pastoral biblical background and understanding. Lanny Padgett, Matt Kimmel, Philip Castaneda, and Anthony Trusk. And then we have Kevin and Dana Spade and Lisa Hinton coming on board as well. Talk about ICI. ICI is offering on a monthly basis core courses. Now, sadly, we had to cancel the March 20 this month's seminar, but that's going to be reassigned in April. ICI is called Integrative because we're trying to integrate three critical areas: our biblical understanding, theology, the science of relationship from psychology, and the person and ministry of the Holy Spirit, who is the healing presence in the counseling experience. Sedem Ecclesia, I want to say publicly, thanks to all the people who come and attend, support Sedem Ecclesia. You make what I do at ICI possible. So here's some recommendation for books. Every time I do a presentation, someone always asks, do you recommend something? And so here's some recommendations regarding books. Dr. Judy and Jack Falswick. They were my two professors at Fuller Theological Seminary in the School of Psychology, and they are internationally known for their work with families and family systems. And there's an excellent book if you want a general integrated book on the family and very practical insights, parenting, marital relationships, and so forth. Dr. Daniel Siegel, international spokesperson for neurobiology, and he has an excellent parenting book called Parenting from the Inside Out. If you want to really understand how to parent well in the first 5 years of life, which are formative. Then also Dr. Siegel's audiobook called The Neurobiology of We. And if you want to listen and get an introduction to neuroscience, there are 60 topics covered and in 7 sections, and it will lay a solid foundation for you to understand neurobiology, which describes how our brain's architecture, structure, and dynamic works in relationship, and how our mind is connected to the brain and relationship. Another excellent book by Dr. Mark Baker. He has one, Spiritual Wisdom for a Happier Life. And then he also has a great, very popular book, Jesus, the Greatest Therapist Who Ever Lived. Now, on a practical level, Chip Dodd, a person who has a PhD also in the area of counseling, has written a couple of excellent books on the heart, the voice of the heart, the needs of the heart. The heart is the center of relationships. As a center of relationships, and he has written a couple very practical books. Dr. Larry Crabb has written, and this is an older book, but I'm kind of somewhat resurrecting it, but it's excellent if you want to understand the nature of relationship and marriage. He calls it the marriage builder. So now going back to Dr. Mark Baker, he has posted some 28 YouTube video clips, which are superb set of clips. If anyone wants to really understand relationship, watching him, here's some bio about Dr. Mark Baker. He's down in Pasadena. He is executive director of La Vie Counseling Center. And there's a picture of the center where I did my clinical internship. And here's one of his video clips on what forgiveness really is. These are short 3, 5, 4-minute clips. Couples, if you want to really improve and enhance your marital relationship, You might want to watch these and just explore together. Uh, Good strategy in learning about relationship is to not to apply things, but to explore, find out like what forgiveness really is, as he covers it here. But rather than applying it, because the moment you try to apply things practically, you create performance anxiety. So a secondary anxiety, performance anxiety, fuses with the original anxiety as evident in the struggle or the problem you have. Here's another one: why healthy conflict is essential. Yes, there's real wisdom. How to love someone who makes you mad. Good luck not having anger in relationship. You can't be human without anger. How to resolve a power struggle. Every relational conflict is locked down into a power struggle where each side is trying to get the other side to believe and accept what they are thinking and what they hold to be true. Uh, Good luck doing that. We are so different that it's almost nearly impossible to be fully on the same page with each other. But what you want to do is not focus on do we agree, but focus on do I validate. You have to go through what that person wants on each side and validate their hearts, what they long for. And he describes that. How to predict divorce with 91% accuracy. Those of you who are struggling about moving towards divorce, if you want to know what are the sad telltale signs, here is a clip. Is anxiety a sign of lack of faith, which is I'm going to cover later on in this presentation? Is addiction a disease? And he clearly redefines addiction. Dealing with bullying, sadly, our kids in school often experience that. Is love or fear more powerful force? And so he pulls apart love and fear. Where is God when it hurts? A question many Christians ask, and it's an essential question to explore. The difference between guilt and shame. All of us walked out of Eden with guilt and shame, and what we have to do is pull apart true guilt and false guilt. And Dr. Mark Baker is going to address in many of his video clips the dynamic of guilt and shame. Baker, what is anger? Again, I said previously, you can't have relationships without anger. Where is God when it hurts? Part 2. Is there something wrong with me if I'm sad? Sad is a primary emotion, deep emotion. And when you experience sadness, you are really at the bottom of the barrel of your heart. And what is sadness? Can a Christian psychologist help a non-Christian? This is an excellent little clip where Baker is suggesting an integrative approach. The real purpose of therapy, sometimes people want to know what they can expect in therapy counseling. How to overcome shame. Note again, he's focusing on shame. The cure for resentment. A lot of people struggle with resentment. How to heal envy and jealousy. Envy, jealousy, resentment, irritation, frustration, all kinds of reactionary emotions which signal hearts in human relationship. Humility is the opposite of low self-esteem. This is an interesting video. How to live a life without shame. There's that shame dynamic again. What do I need to do to overcome shame? How to heal the fear of vulnerability. That's going to connect with shame. Overcoming shame. Let's let go of others' expectation. Dr. Baker wisely focuses many clips on shame because that's the basic primary emotion that's underneath all of our relational conflicts and problems. How to how to heal guilt that won't go away. That's false guilt. False guilt is doesn't matter who, doesn't matter if you repent, make restitution, or get reconciled. You always feel like there's something bad or something wrong. It lingers and lingers. Spiritual wisdom for a happier life. He gives you some integrative insights. How to be a happy person. And so, Dr. Baker, as you can see, has posted many practical relational things with profound insight on YouTube. In this section, religiosity and anxiety research, I'm going to touch upon what Baker and his mentor research that they did for us to dive into anxiety. And the clip is anxiety a sign of lack of faith. Sadly, some Christians believe that if you're anxious, it's somehow a sign of lack of faith. Anxiety generally is just a state of unhappiness, and anxiety is associated with psychological discomfort and guilt. There are two kinds of anxiety. We can talk about the state of anxiety, and that is an actual experience of you feel unhappy, tense, the actual experience of anxiety itself. Then that state of anxiety or experience of anxiety that's constantly repeated over and over in your life, we call trait of anxiety, has a state of anxiety over and over again. And the trait of anxiety is more than experience. There's a pattern, and we can actually say, is that person an anxious person? Interesting enough, anxiety and depression overlap. Anxiety, whatever it is future directed, and depression is actually past directed and past focused. Anxiety in IOG or image of God, Philippians 4:6, have no anxiety about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God. Baker asks the question, if you have anxiety, is that a sign of lack of faith? And that's Philippians 4:6. What does it say about faith and anxiety? Baker also is wrestling. If I'm a real Christian, shouldn't I not be anxious? So Dr. Baker and Dr. Gorsuch was a prominent clinical psychologist in the school where I got my PhD, Fuller Theological Seminary, School of Psychology. And Richard Gorsuch developed a psychometric, a way to measure anxiety. It's considered one of the most popular anxiety measures. And he was interested in integrating religiosity and psychology, and he was editor of the Scientific Study of Religion. Mark Baker studied under him, conducted research with Dr. Gorsuch. And they did an interesting experiment. They went to a Christian wilderness training organization that invited both Christians, non-Christians, and they would train them in wilderness experiences, give them wilderness experiences. So Dr. Baker and Gorsuch wanted to see anxiety levels in people's religiosity. They found that the participants at the wilderness could be classified into people who had a personal faith in Jesus Christ, people who seem to have inherited a social Christian faith because of their parents and family systems, and people who express uh, no faith, atheists and agnostics. In the wilderness test, they measured after a very anxious episode that the camp would take the participants through, like rappelling off of a cliff, which for most people can be a very highly anxious, tenseful, stressful experience. They measured right after the episode the level of anxiety and looked at that person's religiosity. And then 2 weeks later, they remeasured anxiety. It was the same metric, uh, and to see pre and post event anxiety assessment. They found something very stunning results. People who had a personal religiosity faith were no longer anxious 2 weeks post anxious episode. They showed anxiety right after uh, the event, but 2 weeks later, their anxiety seemed to have been held. Atheists, nominally religious and socially religious people, after 2 weeks after a stressful event, were still anxious. Uh, uh, so here are some thoughts. Whenever in my PowerPoint you see DN, that indicates my own editorial comment. David Mannock. Uh, we're no longer in Eden. It is natural, normal to experience anxiety as an existential condition of life, since we're no longer in Eden. And we're haunted by the memory of Eden, which is sense of something profoundly a paradise lost. So in a fallen world, good luck not experiencing some anxiety. That's what I call existential anxiety. There, we're not talking about anxiety as some psychological anxiety, but as a condition of being fallen creatures in a fallen world. All humans have relational anxiety, though some people suffer greatly from psychological anxiety, which has to do with the brain, the mind, and relationship. Again, another comments. So, if you want a takeaway from this PowerPoint, this is what I would suggest. Shared anxiety breaks the power of anxiety. The quickest way to reduce and break the power of anxiety is share your anxiety with someone. Remember, James says, therefore, confess your sins to each other and pray for each other that you may be healed. Profound in its simplicity. If God is designed that if we confess to each other and pray for each other, note the movement towards each other, note them by sharing of whatever concern each side has. The power of anxiety is broken through shared relationship. Shared anxiety keeps the power. Unshared anxiety keeps the power of anxiety in place. Our society, which holds on to the myth, the notion of independence, sadly tends to isolate each one of us. If we have an anxiety experience, we somehow feel, given what we've inherited from our society, that somehow you should go inside yourself and work it out and become a better person. sharing directly with God and sharing indirectly by sharing with someone you trust will break the power of anxiety. Why? Because that's how God's designed us. So, going back to Philippians 4:6, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation by prayer, petition, with thanksgiving, present your request to God. Personal relationship to God is a key to anxiety. This verse tells us what to do when you're anxious. Whatever prayer, petition, or supplication, thanksgiving, and request is movement towards God. And it's a relationship between you and God that starts to break up the power of anxiety. You will feel anxiety in life, existential, post-Eden reality, remember? And we don't have to stay in anxiety. Relationship to God and relationship to each other, that is a secure relationship, holds anxiety. All right, so now we're going to complicate the picture. We began with a simple research that said, everyone can be anxious. Gorsuch and Baker recognized that in their wilderness camp anxiety and religiosity research. Participants participated in dangerous activity, and they measured their religiosity and their level of anxiety, and then 2 weeks later. Okay, so now I'm going to try to complicate the picture by adding some biblical context under understanding anxiety. What does the scripture contextually helps us understand about anxiety and sin dynamic? Okay, question: why is there so much pain and suffering, including anxiety, in the world? If you ask church people that, Christian people that, oftentimes the answers most Christians seem to answer was because of the fall. And if you ask a deeper question, okay, where in the Bible is the fall referenced? Oftentimes Christians can reference Genesis 3. But in Jesus' day, if you ask the same question, why is there so much pain and suffering in the world? The Hebrew people would also respond with Genesis 3, but they would add Genesis 6 and 11. Modern Christians think of the fall or fallenness of the world, of humans in the world, as a Genesis 3 dynamic. Hebrew people understood you can't understand sin unless you take into consideration 3 critical events: what happened in Genesis 3, what happened in Genesis 6, and what happened in Genesis 11. So, let's back up for a moment. Michael Heisner helps us understand that the Bible needs to be read in its context. The context of the Bible is not our modern or postmodern worldview, or even our postmodern worldview. And the context of our Bible is not our systematic theology that most Christians have been handed down through their churches. Systematic theology is based upon Greek metaphysics, and the Greeks split spirit from the body, and they split heaven from earth. That's their metaphysics, or the way they saw reality. The Hebrew people did not see a split, but heaven and earth overlap. Now, with a split, you have a brilliant way to do science in systematic theology by creating categories: doctrine of God, doctrine of creation, doctrine of salvation, doctrine of end times, and doctrine of sanctification, and doctrine of humans, and doctrine of sin. And you can read the Bible and put them into nice little boxes, which is wonderful. Problem is, that's not how the Bible is written. Yes, some Christians will say to me, but the New Testament is written in Greek. Yes, but the thoughts in the New Testament are just Hebrew thoughts. So New Testament is Hebrew understanding with a Greek overcoat. And so the context of the Bible is not our context. The context of the Bible is the ancient world, how the ancient people understood life and reality, and ancient cosmology and ancient worldview. Now, the importance of context. Here's a personal example. In 1993, my Japanese family invited me to bring my wife and the kids and visit them. So Brennan and Jonathan and I, we went to Japan to see my Japanese family, and we were there for a week. Now, afterwards, my wife said while we were in Japan, the whole time I walked 2 steps in front of her. And to this day, I have no memory of that. Something of my early childhood culture kicked in. Here in the United States, as an American, I never walk 2 steps in front of my wife. I walk side by side. That's an example of culture determining our experiences and our understanding. So, if we want to understand the Bible, we want to understand the context, cultural context and worldview of the Bible. The context of the Bible is not our modern view, which has been impacted by Enlightenment. Dr. Michael Heisner, an excellent Old Testament theologian who is trained in ancient cosmology and worldview. The context of the Bible is the ancient world and cultures with their way of seeing the world. So when you read the Bible, you are reading over the shoulders of the ancients. Michael Heisner says it this way: the Bible's not written by us. The Bible is not written to us. And some Christians, when they see that and hear that sentence, are somewhat shocked. The Bible's not written to us. The Bible is written for us, but it was written to the people it was addressing in real time and space and culture, and who were reading over their shoulders. The classic mistake of reading the Bible from our perspective is the way evangelicals, charismatics, Pentecostals, and Catholics misinterpret the book of Revelation. Book of Revelation, written by St. John, was to the early Christians who were constantly under the oppressive regime of the Roman Emperor and Empire, and were losing their lives in persecution and also annihilated in the arena for Roman sport. So we're reading whatever the seven visions of the book of Revelation is about over the shoulders of the early Christian early Christians in the Roman Empire who were routinely losing their lives. So whatever book of Revelation content is, it has to make sense to them. And only then is it for us. There's an example of contextual understanding. Hebrew worldview, When you ask the Hebrew person about sin, they will reference Genesis 3, 6 and 11. You ask a modern person about sin, they go straight to Genesis 3. Okay, Genesis 3. Human rebellion begins. The problem is before rebellion and sin happened, as described in Genesis 3 on earth, there was rebellion in heaven, and that rebellion is brought down to earth. The problem, the ancient rebellion, the rebellion started on earth and came to earth, and we see that commingling of fallen angels who started a rebellion in heaven and brought it down to earth, and then our ancients, Adam and Eve, slept with the enemy on their honeymoon, and then the rebellion is consolidated in Genesis 3, 6, and 11. And that's the foundational theological understanding basis for all this pain and suffering, and what is God going to do in his redemptive movement. Genesis 3. Now the serpent was more subtle than any other wild creature that the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, "Did God say, 'You shall not eat of any tree of the garden'?" Well, there's that temptation. Now, it's sad that the Hebrew text here, Hebrew word is translated serpent. So we have this mythology that says snake in the Garden of Eden. Actually, it's better to understand a snake-like figure, which is a symbolic language representing a fallen angel, and New Testament identifies that as Satan. Now, we need to go to Genesis 6. So, it was God's intention that Adam and Eve in relationship would be his image representative here on earth, and Adam and Eve would, in trust and love and being empowered by God, would subdue the whole earth and take this little garden pilot project called Eden and make the whole earth Eden, where humans and God would dwell together. I believe if the fall hadn't happened, if we hadn't rebelled, that God would have downloaded science and technology. He would have taught us how to do irrigation and make the deserts blossom. He would have taught us how to plant trees in desert regions to help stabilize climate change. There are all kinds of things that God would have inspired, enabled, empowered us, and together with God, we would have made the whole earth in Eden. Genesis 6. When men began to multiply on the face of the ground, and daughters were born to them, and the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were fair, they took to wife such of them as they chose. Notice, sons of God. Notice Genesis 3, a fallen angel inspiring humans to rebel in their honeymoon moment called the Garden of Eden. And notice in Genesis 6, we have further fallen angels seeing that the daughters of men, women were desirable, and they are crossing boundaries God has set in place and cohabitating with them, and they produce giants. Okay, and one of the last giants to be destroyed is Goliath, which David slays as a shepherd boy when Israel and the Philistines are in the battle. Okay, so you have not only humans switching sides from God to the rebels, fallen angels in heaven. But now you have fallen angels cohabitating and by implication, sin and sinfulness, depravity, and all the fruits of it is accelerating. And the acceleration culminates in Genesis 11. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad among the face of the whole earth." So the Lord scattered them abroad from there and over the face of all the earth, and they left off building the city. Therefore its name was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth, and from there the Lord scattered them abroad over the face of all the earth. Okay, so the Tower of Babel, we have Genesis 3, our ancient Adam and Eve slept with the enemy, honeymoon, period, Eden. Genesis 6, we have a rapid acceleration of depravity, darkness, and evil, and hybrid race created from that. In Genesis 11, we have the nations coming together, these fallen rebels, and they're going to build a tower. And the tower is designed as a human unity enterprise. It's globalization, and is designed to reach heaven, and then they're going to call down God and negotiate a covenant term with God. In other words, they're going to write how the human-God relationship is going to be constituted, and God says no. Okay. Genesis 11, Tower of Babel, is a strange story that most Christians misunderstand. It is very profound and has a very important application even for today. It is the nature of human sinfulness to go against God, take the things of God, and turn it into selfish design. And it is the nature of human depravity and sinfulness to not improve with time. Technology can improve with time, but not character. As Genesis 6 says, it's the nature of human sinfulness that we accelerate in a downward slide. One of the Hebrew pictures of sin is drawing an arrow, shooting the arrow, and the arrow, given enough time because of gravity, will descend. It's the nature of sin and simple humanity. It will descend into anarchy, chaos, and will self-destruct. And it's the nature of sin, according to Genesis 11, that humans will gather together and in their sinful unity try to usurp God. And the current manifestation of that in the 20th century has been the movement towards globalization. Now, God's remedy to that is scatter the people into different groups, and to keep them from false, sinful unity, He scatters them into different groups, and He divides up their common language, okay, which keeps them from coming into unity. Then He allows nation to come against other nations, because one nation will become the supreme, more powerful, then another nation rises up and destroys them. It's repeated throughout human history. It's a sad, painful history, but it's a divine intervention allowed by God, as implied by Genesis 11. God does not want the nations to come together, because when fallen humans and fallen nationhood does that, they always go towards the Tower of Babel episode. So sin, yes, Genesis 3, Genesis 6, Genesis 11. The rebellion is consolidated. Genesis 3, rebellion Eden, the fall under the serpent's temptation. Genesis 6, Noah and the flood. Depravity increases by the influence of the watchers, which is the ancient word for fallen angels. Genesis 11, Tower of Babel, judgment of the nations put under the control of the sons of God. Sons of God there are fallen angels. Deuteronomy 32, 8 through 9 reveals that when God punished humans and fallen angels for the Tower of Babel incident, God scattered the people. God assigned fallen angels or sons of God to various people. Tower of Babel, he destroys the Babel, he scatters the people, and they become little different nations, and he assigns over each one a fallen sons of God, a fallen angel. It's like God saying, you reject me. This is really what you want. You want to be inspired and live under authority of fallen angels, then I'm going to let you have it. Then in Genesis 12, he begins redemption by selecting one people. But God himself was the portion of Israel. Deuteronomy 32, remember the days of old. Consider the years of generation. Ask your father, he will show you, your elders, and they will tell you when the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind. Note the reference to Genesis 11. He fixed the borders of peoples according to the numbers of the sons of God, the fallen angels. But the Lord's portion is people. Jacob is allotted inheritance, and he calls Abraham, and with Abraham's family begins a redemption process to redeem the all humanity and the whole earth. Then Genesis 11, so the Lord dispersed them from over the face of the earth, and they left off building the city. Therefore, its name was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth, and from there the Lord dispersed them over the face of all the earth. Fallen angels, under the inspiration, fallen humans, under the inspiration of fallen angels, will move towards unity to create structures, one world government, all the other things that are against God. Okay, and God is redemptive love and moves says, no, I'll scatter things, I'll keep humans from going into globalizational unity, and I'm going to choose people, I'm going to save them, choose them, and make them salt and light, and complete the redemption act. Ephesians 6:12, Paul gets all this. Now, this is all ancient cosmology, ancient history, and is strange to modern people, but that's the context of the Bible, which is the ancient text. Paul gets this. Ephesians, he says, for we are not contending against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against the powers, against the world rulers. Note the language of this present darkness, against the spiritual host of the wickedness in the heavenly places. Okay, it's very clear. Fallen humans on fallen earth are organized by these fallen angel hierarchical organizations and powers and authorities. Now, getting back to Philippians 4:6. Don't be anxious about anything, but in every situation by prayer and petition with thanksgiving present your request to God. personal relationship to God is the key to anxiety. This verse tells us what to do when you're anxious, when you feel anxiety in life, whether it's existential anxiety, which is post-Eden reality. There's no way not to be anxious in a fallen world. You don't have to stay anxious. The way we move out of anxiety is Philippians 4:6. Its relationship to God holds the anxiety. Shared anxiety breaks the power of anxiety. Our present situation, coronavirus and anxiety, note all the things on the media currently going on about the virus and our anxiety, our safety. Are we going to be okay? First Thessalonians 5:3 says, when people say there is peace and security, then suddenly destruction will come upon them as travail comes upon a woman with child, and there will be no escape. This verse prophetically suggests to me that there is going to be a time when humans will be crying peace and security. Not that they're declaring that's what's in place, but they're expressing their longing today. If you listen carefully to the anxieties about the virus, you hear constantly people longing for peace and security. You go to Costco, certain items are gone. You go to Fred Meyer's, you go to Walmart, some of the shelves are empty because people are hoarding and people are wanting to pad their peace and security. When people say there's peace and security, or when people say we'll need or want peace and security, then sudden destruction will come. Interesting. But in all that, we're not called to anxiety. Hebrews 12:26, at that time his voice shook the earth, but now he has promised, yet once more I will shake not only the earth, but also the heavens. This phrase, yet once more, indicates a removal of things that are shaken, that is, things that have been made in order that things that cannot be shaken may remain. It's sad that the current pandemic started, in a sense, as an ancient violation of an ancient biblical law. God clearly told the Hebrew people about how to eat in a healthy way. Stay away from certain animals that he designed as clean, and certain animals he designed as unclean. And the Jewish people were told not to eat unclean animals. The current coronavirus is a direct product of, sadly, people eating unclean animals. Crossing the boundaries. God has wisdom boundaries throughout life, like clean and unclean animals. How did AIDS epidemic start in Africa? Again, crossing of boundaries. And notice that Genesis 6 dynamic. Fallen sons of God, angels coming down, seeing women and going into cohabitation and producing hybrid offspring called giants. And Hebrews 12 here talks about all this. One thing God's accomplishing is he's allowing the whole earth to be shaken, so that what remains, in order that the thing that cannot be shaken may remain. What is that? That's your relationship to God. Everything in life can be taken away from you. Your family can reject you. Your family can die in a tragic accident. A fire can consume all of your possessions. everything that you hold dear as the means of having safety and security can be destroyed, taken away, can be shaken. But there's one thing that can't be shaken, and that is your relationship to Jesus Christ. And Jesus says, "Lo, I'm with you to the ends of the earth. I'll never leave you, and I will never forsake you." And his hand is upon us, and he holds us firm. Um, Now, I just want to add a little pragmatics about the coronavirus and offer a little pragmatic understanding about hand washing. I was trained as an army medic in the I was trained as a medic in the army, and then I also worked post-army in hospitals for 5 years. So I was trained about sanitation practices and keeping a sterile field. And so here's something practical when you go into a public restroom these days. This is just something of a little practical insight, and then I'll get back to the message. When you go into a public restroom, assume everything's dirty. Okay. Then you get the soap and you wash your hands. And you want to wash your hands for 20 seconds. And then you want not to touch anything with the clean hands. What people will do is they will wash their hands, then they would reach over and turn off the faucet with their clean hands. Now there's cross-contamination. Or they'll take their clean hands and hit the towel bar to get some towel, or they would reach over and open the bathroom door. Cross-contamination. Once you wash your hands, you don't want to cross-contaminate. Take clean hands. Anything you touch will cross-contaminate. So what you want to do, wash your hands, and you want to use your elbow, or better yet, you want to hit the towel bar a couple times to let out a little bit of the paper towel before you finish washing your hands. And then you want to use a towel, wipe your hands, and then wipe the knob, or open the door and throw it away. So don't touch anything after you wash your hands. Yes. Yes.
Well done, David.
Yes. Welcome, Rachel. Thank you. All right, thanks. That was great. Okay, now getting back to anxiety. Matthew 13:20. As for what was sown among thorns, this is he who hears the word, but the cares of the world and delights in riches or anxiety choke the world and it proves unfruitful. Okay, so God has to allow everything to be shaken to bring home to each one of us what is our security, what is our safety, and that's relationship to God himself. And Jesus is very clear. He says in Mark 4:9, but the cares of the world and delights and riches and desires for other things enter in and choke the word, and it proves unfruitful. Through the virus pandemic we're going through, we Christians have a chance to deepen our relationship to Jesus Christ and learn to just be held in his hands, and that relationship will start to break up this existential anxiety. Okay? Apostle Paul struggled with daily anxiety. You mean Paul wasn't a saint? He was a real person, and he had burdens and cares and anxieties, and he had, through all those things, be shaken free of holding on to those things and learn to hold on to and be held by Jesus Christ. 1 Corinthians 5:2, for while we were still in the tent, we sigh with anxiety, not that we will be unclothed, but that we will be further clothed, so that what is mortal may be swallowed up and by life. Note, he's implying you're going to have anxiety if you are on a fallen world. 2 Corinthians 11:28. And apart from other things, there is a daily pressure upon me for my anxiety for all the churches. He deeply cared, and he was deeply anxious at times. Yet in all those things, he learned to keep moving towards God in his relationship to Jesus Christ that held and broke the power of these anxieties. Present and past. In the present, there's all the past in twofold way. When you're in the present, the past, what has happened, the antecedent, is present in the present in a twofold way. The past, you have the actual events and episodes, things that happen, and then you have an unconscious interpretation or unconscious perspective or narrative of the event. So you have two things, what happened and how you interpret what happened. Now, of the two, what actually happened and the narrative of that, which is the most compelling factor as far as anxiety and as far as life satisfaction and well-being, is actually the interpretation and narrative. The power of positive and a negative narrative or interpretation. Okay. Research indicates that mother who had pain, abuse, trauma in her childhood, if she has a positive interpretation through forgiveness, knowing God's love, trusting and growing in God's relationship, if she has a positive interpretation, narrative of the painful event, then the pain and anxiety of that painful event will be held and will decrease, and she won't pass it on to her children. If a mother has a negative interpretation or narrative of the pain, abuse, and trauma, the pain will be kept in place, it will actually increase, and she will pass it on to her children.